Vanshreikenberg. Today, I will be reading to you sections of Silas Marner to explain how Silas underwent the most significant internal changes. We know Silas underwent the most significant internal changes because Silas was the only one to come full circle and improve in the ways he viewed life, people, God, and himself. First, on page 5, the author explains Silas's previous attitudes towards God and others in this flashback.
Marner was highly thought of in that little hidden world, known to itself as the church assembling in Lantern Yard. He was believed to be a young man of exemplary life and ardent faith.
In this passage, we get a glimpse of the life that Marner lost before he was stricken by tragedy. He was practically the simple man who had everything he could want: a future wife, a place in the church, and true happiness. This scene shows significance because those were all things he would lose later on in this narrative. Secondly, on page 6, we look at Silas's view of God and salvation through one of his talks with his former best friend, William Dane.
One of the most frequent topics of conversation between the two friends was assurance of salvation. Silas confessed that he could never arrive at anything higher than hope mingled with fear.
Next, we continue on page 6 and look at Silas's view of people before the incident.
It had seemed to the unsuspecting Silas that the friendship had suffered no chill, even from his formation of another attachment of a closer kind.
This instance is important because it shows the basis of thought that Silas had with the people before the church turned its back. In this next quote, on page 9, Silas suffers the biggest hardship of his early life.
He was solemnly suspended from church membership.
There is no just God that governs righteously, but a God of lies that bears false witness against the innocent.
There was a general shudder at his blasphemy.
This is the first major turning point in Silas's life, which sent him spiraling into an eternal abyss of emptiness, depression, and money hoarding. It is important to review all of his original views. He saw God as caring, people as inherently good, and was a much more vibrant person. All it took was this event in the church for his mind to be completely changed and sent down a dark path. Since he did not have a firm grip on his present, he would lose his grip in the future. The next point, on page 15, explains Silas's last connection to his previous life and how he felt when it was taken away from him.
Ever since he came to Ravello, he had a brown earthenware pot, which he held as his most precious utensil among the very few conveniences he had granted himself.
Continued later on the page.
One day, as he was returning from the well, he stumbled against the step of the stile, and his brown pot, falling with force against the stones that overarched the ditch below, was broken into 3 pieces. Silas picked up the pieces and carried them home with grief in his heart. The brown pot could never be of use to him anymore, but he stuck the bits together and propped the ruin of it on its old place for a memorial.
This shows the internal changes of Silas after all the years in Ravello. You can tell by the pot breaking that he had been holding on to his past life for quite some time, and not really living his life in Ravello. He's physically present, but mentally gone. Kind of like me when I was a sophomore in English. The pot breaking is like his last tie to his old life being taken away from him, and it leaves him even more hollow and emptier than before. Silas's biggest sin and deviation from God was his idolization of money, represented on page 12.
He had seemed to love money little in the years when every penny had its purpose for him, for he loved the purpose then. But now, when all purpose was gone, that habit of looking towards the money and grasping it with a sense of fulfilled effort made a loom that was deep enough for the seeds of desire.
This shows how Silas took money and used it to fill the hole in his heart that was empty from the events of Lantern Yard. Instead of running towards God, he chose money to give purpose and meaning to his life. This shows major internal change, because his mind has completely shifted from an average people-loving person to a greedy hermit. The second biggest hardship Silas underwent is when he returned from running quick errands. He found that his money, which he had idolized in his life, had been stolen.
Again, he put his trembling hands to his head and gave a wild, ringing scream, the cry of desolation. For a few moments after, he stood motionless, but the cry had relieved him from the first maddening pressure of the truth. He turned to his loom, instinctively seeking this as the strongest assurance of reality.
This again shows how much of an idol money had become in Silas's life, and how much it had destroyed him at the loss of it. Since Silas had been relying on nothing but money for all of his time in Ravello, it was as if his purpose in life was stolen along with the money. This also explains why he went into a dark and deep depression, because he felt like the last thing he had in his new life had been ripped away from him. Finally, a good thing happens to Silas that changes the direction of his life for the better on page 99.
Tell anybody shows they've a right to take her away from me.
Said Marner.
Mother's dead, and I reckon the father's not there. It's a lone thing, and I'm a lone thing. My money's gone, I don't know where, and this has come from I don't know where. I know nothing, I'm partly mazed.
This is the first major turning point in Silas's life, where he internally starts to change for the good. You see him accepting the child, and viewing it in the same way in love that he had for money, except with the child, it is a healthy love and not one of greed. His love for Eppie causes him to have a greater love for humanity and for people around him, and made him happier. This is the first time in a long time of Silas's life that something good has happened to him, and he has let it change him. On the way home from church, Silas and Eppie were talking to Dolly, and Silas went on to say,
I have a feeling of it now. It makes a man as if there is good more than I can see. In spite of all the trouble and the wickedness, drawing of the lots is dark, but the child was sent to me. There's dealings with us.
Looking at this final transition in Silas's life, he now has faith once again in humanity and in himself. The story has come completely full circle, and he feels as though life has meaning once again outside of money. He now has a love for both God and people, two things he had lost for most of his life. So, we may conclude that Silas went through the most internal changes in